Adrien Romano did not react the way ordinary men reacted to fear. Chloe saw it in the single slow movement of his hand as he reached for the bourbon, his fingers resting lightly against the crystal as if the note beneath them meant nothing at all. He did not flinch. He did not frown. He did not even look surprised. He simply read her handwriting once, then lifted his eyes to her face with a calm that made her knees feel weak. Those dark eyes were sharper up close than they had seemed from across the dining room. Unreadable and steady, the kind of eyes that missed nothing and forgave even less. Chloe had expected confusion, maybe anger, maybe a quick signal for security to remove the awkward waitress who had crossed a line no one in this restaurant would ever dare to cross. Instead, Adrien leaned back slightly in the curved leather booth, one arm draped along the backrest, and gave the smallest nod, as if acknowledging a move in a game only he understood. The candlelight painted one side of his face gold and left the other in shadow. He looked less like a diner and more like a man seated on a throne he had never needed to claim out loud. Chloe swallowed and lowered her gaze at once, because staring too long at Adrien Romano felt like stepping into traffic and hoping the cars would stop. Around them, Belladonna remained wrapped in its polished illusion of safety. The string quartet glided into another slow melody. A server passed with a tray of veal chop and truffle risotto. At the corner table, a woman in diamonds laughed too loudly at something her husband had not meant as a joke. The city beyond the tall windows glittered in neat rows of white and amber, 20 floors below, as if Manhattan itself were another decoration arranged for men like Adrien. Yet Chloe could feel the crack beneath the surface now. It was there in the bartender's rigid shoulders, in the man by the bar who pretended to check his phone every few seconds while never really looking at the screen, in the extra beat of silence that seemed to open between one violin note and the next. Adrien picked up the glass. Chloe's heart lurched so hard she nearly reached for it, but she stopped herself. Just in time. No, not yet. Something in his expression told her he was not a man who wanted panic. He was a man who wanted truth. He turned the tumbler once in his hand, watching the amber liquid catch the light. Then he looked at her again, not at the drink, at her, as though the poison mattered less than the girl who had chosen to warn him. Chloe felt heat rise under her skin. She had spent most of her life trying not to be seen. Being noticed by Adrien Romano felt dangerously close to being claimed by something she did not understand. He lifted the bourbon halfway, just enough that anyone watching would believe he intended to drink it. Then, with perfect calm, he said, "What is your name?" His voice was deep and controlled, quiet enough that only she could hear, but it carried the weight of command so naturally that her answer came before fear could stop it. "Chloe, sir." "How long have you worked here, Chloe?" She blinked. Of all the questions he could have asked, that was not the one she expected. "For months." "And in 4 months," he said, still holding the glass, "have you made a habit of saving strangers?" She did not know whether it was a test, a warning, or something else entirely. "No, sir." Adrien's mouth shifted by the slightest degree, not quite a smile, but enough to let her know he had heard the truth in her voice. "Then I should assume you have a reason." Chloe hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the bar before she could stop herself. It was a tiny movement, barely anything, but Adrien followed it immediately. He did not turn his head. He did not make it obvious. But something changed in the stillness around him, as subtle and swift as a door locking. "Who?" he asked. She could not force the words out. The man near the bar was facing away now, but the silver serpent ring glinted when he lifted his hand to adjust his cuff. Chloe felt the old dread bloom inside her, cold and familiar. Her brother had worn fear the same way other people wore a coat in winter, all the time, every day, never taking it off even in his own apartment. In the weeks before he vanished, he had double-checked locks, lowered his voice on phone calls, and once, late at night in their tiny queen's kitchen, he had looked at her with exhausted eyes and said, "There are symbols you do not ignore. There are people who smile before they ruin your life." At the time, Chloe had thought he was spiraling from stress. She had been 23, working 2 jobs, trying to keep rent paid, thinking danger belonged to richer, darker worlds than hers. Then he disappeared. Then the police told her not to ask more questions. Then she found the envelope with no return address and the tiny silver serpent sketched in one corner. Adrien set the glass back on the table without drinking. The sound was soft, but to Chloe it felt louder than a fire alarm. "You are afraid," he said. It was not cruel. It was not even judgmental. It was simply accurate. Chloe drew a shaky breath. "I know that symbol." His gaze sharpened. "What symbol?" She looked toward the man at the bar again, this time just enough to make the answer clear. Adrien was silent for one long second. Then he reached for the folded linen napkin beside his plate, opened it, and placed it calmly across his lap as though settling in for dinner. But when he spoke again, the air between them had changed completely. "Chloe," he said softly, "do not look anywhere but at me for the next 10 seconds. Chloe kept her eyes on Adrien Romano exactly as he instructed, though every instinct in her body begged her to glance toward the bar again. 10 seconds had never felt so long. The violinists continued their soft, elegant melody as if nothing had shifted, as if the entire room were not suddenly balanced on something thin and invisible. Adrien's expression remained composed, almost bored, but she could feel a tension moving around him like a current beneath still water. He was listening to everything now. The scrape of a chair leg across polished wood, the muted ring of a spoon against porcelain, the faint buzz of a phone somewhere near the hostess stand. Chloe drew in a careful breath and tried to steady her hands against the silver tray pressed to her waist. "Good," Adrien said at last, his voice so low she barely heard it above the music. "Now tell me exactly what you saw." Chloe swallowed. "The bartender poured something into your drink." Adrien did not blink. "Describe him." "Tall, dark hair, white jacket, but not the regular evening bartender. I have never seen him before tonight." "And the man with the ring?" Chloe hesitated only a second. "Navy jacket, mid-40s maybe. He has been watching your table without making it obvious. Or trying not to." Adrien's gaze stayed on her face, but a quiet intelligence sharpened behind his eyes, like a lock turning into place. "You notice a great deal for someone who tries so hard to disappear." The words were not mocking. That somehow made them more dangerous. Chloe felt heat rise to her cheeks. He was right. She had trained herself to be invisible, to move softly, to make no impression, but invisibility required observation. It required noticing who was angry, who was drunk, who might touch your arm too long, who might refuse to tip, who might smile and still mean harm. It had kept her safe more than once. Tonight, it had led her here, standing too close to a man whose name alone made powerful people sit straighter. Adrien lowered one hand to the table and tapped once against the white linen. The movement seemed casual, but within seconds a man appeared at the edge of the booth as if summoned out of the air itself. He wore a charcoal suit, an earpiece hidden beneath dark hair, and the expressionless face of someone who had forgotten how to be surprised. He did not look at Chloe directly. His attention went first to Adrien, then briefly to the untouched bourbon. "Luca," Adrien said, in the same tone another man might use to request more bread, "have the bottle removed. Quietly. And bring me the list of everyone who came through the service entrance in the last hour." "Yes, sir." Luca nodded once and stepped away without another word. Chloe stared after him, stunned by how fast the room had changed without seeming to change at all. No raised voices. No alarm. No scene. Only invisible instructions sliding into motion beneath candlelight and polished manners. Adrien turned back to her. "You did not scream. You did not run. What?" The question landed harder than she expected. She looked down for a moment, then lifted her eyes because she sensed he would know if she lied. "Because I knew no one would believe me if I panicked. And because by the time they did, it would be too late." Adrien studied her in silence. There was something unsettling about being examined by a man who clearly spent his life sorting truth from performance. Chloe had been underestimated by almost everyone she had ever met. She knew the look people gave when they decided too quickly what kind of girl you were. Quiet, harmless, unimportant. Adrien was not looking at her that way. He was measuring her. That was worse. "This symbol," he said. "The serpent. Tell me why it matters." Chloe's throat tightened. For months, she had kept that secret buried beneath work shifts, overdue bills, and sleepless nights. Saying it aloud here, in the middle of this shining restaurant, made it feel more real than ever. "My brother saw it before he disappeared." Adrien's face did not move, but his attention deepened in a way she could feel. His name? Ethan Bennett. She had not spoken it to a stranger in weeks. The sound of it almost broke something in her chest. He worked in corporate accounting downtown. Nothing glamorous. Just spreadsheets and long hours and too much coffee. Then last winter, he started acting like someone was watching him. He stopped sleeping well. He bought a second lock for our apartment. He told me if anything happened to him, I should leave New York. Adrien's voice stayed calm. Did he tell you why? Not clearly. Chloe tightened her grip on the tray. He said there were payments hidden inside clean books. Money routed through restaurant groups and importing companies. He said people with expensive shoes and polished voices were doing ugly things behind perfect paperwork. A faint shift crossed Adrien's features at that. Not surprise exactly, but recognition. Chloe saw it, and her pulse jumped. He knew what that meant. Of course he did. Men like Adrien Romano lived in worlds built from clean surfaces and dirty truths. And then, he asked. Chloe looked past his shoulder at the candle flickering in its glass holder, because it was easier than looking directly at him. While she said the next part. Then he vanished. 3 days later they said it was an accident. I knew it was not. A week after the funeral, I found an envelope tucked behind the cereal boxes in our kitchen. Inside was a flash drive and a note with one line on it. If you ever see the silver serpent, trust your fear. Adrien was silent for a long beat. Around them, plates were cleared, wine was poured, and a room full of wealthy strangers kept performing normalcy while the truth gathered under the table like a storm. Then Adrien leaned slightly closer, not enough to alarm anyone watching, but enough that Chloe caught the clean scent of cedar and expensive cologne. His voice dropped lower. Chloe, listen to me carefully. From this moment forward, you do exactly what I say, and no matter what happens next, you do not let anyone separate you from me. Chloe's breath caught at the quiet authority in Adrien's voice, and for one strange second the noise of belladonna seemed to fade into something distant and hollow, as if the entire restaurant had become a painted backdrop, and only the two of them were real. Do not let anyone separate you from me. The word should have sounded absurd. She was a waitress in a black service dress with sore feet, unpaid utility bills, and a life built on staying out of dangerous people's way. He was Adrien Romano, a man whose name carried the kind of gravity that bent a room around it. And yet she believed him instantly, because beneath his calm there was no uncertainty at all. He had moved past suspicion, past curiosity. Whatever this was, he understood it now as a threat. Chloe nodded once, though her pulse was moving too fast for her body to feel steady. Adrien glanced toward the untouched bourbon, then toward the empty chair across from him. And when he spoke again, his tone shifted almost imperceptibly, turning from confidential to social, smooth enough for any nearby ears to mistake the moment for an ordinary exchange between a powerful customer and a nervous server. Sit down, he said. Chloe blinked. Sir, if you remain standing, you look afraid. If you sit, you look like you are receiving instructions about wine service. His expression did not change. Sit down, Chloe. She obeyed before she could think through what it meant. Sliding into the seat opposite Adrien Romano felt like crossing a line she could never uncross. The leather was cool beneath her hands. The candle between them flickered once, reflecting in the polished silverware and the untouched glass at his side. Chloe kept her back straight and folded her trembling fingers together in her lap, hoping no one in the dining room was paying enough attention to notice how unnatural this looked. But of course people noticed Adrien. They always would. A woman at the next table glanced over, curiosity bright in her eyes, then quickly looked away when Adrien turned his head by half an inch. That was all it took. Chloe had seen wealthy men command with money, managers command with cruelty, and drunk men command with volume. Adrien commanded with stillness. Luca returned a moment later, stopping at the edge of the booth with the same discreet posture as before. The bottle is gone, he said quietly. The bartender is no longer at his station. Adrien's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Gone. He used the service corridor. We are checking cameras now. Adrien tapped one finger against the tablecloth. Once. Deliberate. Controlled. And the guest with the serpent ring? Luca's pause was brief, but Chloe felt it like a chill. Still present. He made a call 30 seconds ago and has not left his position. Adrien nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. Double the security at the elevators. No one exits this floor without being seen. Yes, sir. Luca turned to leave, then glanced at Chloe for the first time with something close to assessment in his eyes. Not hostility. Not kindness. A recalculation. as if she had become a factor in a problem that had just changed shape. When he disappeared back into the dining room, Adrien reached for the menu and opened it, using the stiff leather cover to shield his mouth from view. "There is another layer to this," he murmured. Chloe stared at him. "How do you know?" "Because poison bourbon is dramatic," Adrien said softly. "Dramatic men like witnesses. Serious men prefer certainty." The elegance of the room pressed in around them, all velvet sound and golden light, but Chloe felt cold along her arms. Then the drink was not the whole plan. No, he turned a page in the menu though he was not reading it. It was a test, to see whether I was predictable, protected, distracted, or already compromised. Chloe's mouth went dry. Compromised by who? Adrien's eyes lifted to hers over the top edge of the menu. "That is what I intend to find out." For a moment, she forgot to breathe. There was nothing reckless in him, nothing theatrical. The danger around Adrien Romano did not feel like a storm. It felt like architecture, structured, hidden, built into the walls long before you realized you were standing inside it. Chloe looked toward the main dining room and immediately wished she had not. The man in the navy jacket was no longer near the bar. One of the violinists had stopped playing and was adjusting her music stand, but her hands were shaking. At the hostess station, a young assistant was smiling too brightly at a couple in evening clothes while glancing toward the elevators every few seconds. The illusion of luxury was still there, but now Chloe could see the seams. "He moved," she whispered. Adrien did not turn. "Who?" "The man with the ring. He is not there anymore." Adrien closed the menu. The sound was soft, final. "Then he has either finished his job or moved to the next phase." Chloe's stomach tightened so hard it hurt. "You sound very calm about that." "Calm is useful," Adrien said. Then, after a beat, his voice lowered even more. "Fear is also useful, if it sharpens you instead of ruling you." The words sank into her with unsettling force. Her brother had once said something similar, standing at their kitchen sink at 2 in the morning with city lights reflecting in the window behind him. Trust fear when it points. Do not trust it when it drives. At the time she had not understood. Sitting across from Adrien Romano now, she finally did. Adrien slipped one hand inside his jacket, not fast, not alarmingly, just long enough to retrieve a slim black phone. He glanced at the screen, and something colder settled over his features. "As I thought," he said. Chloe leaned forward before she could stop herself. "What?" He set the phone face down on the table. The cameras in the service corridor went dark for exactly 90 seconds. Chloe stared. "That cannot be a coincidence." "No," Adrien said. "It is not." His gaze shifted past her shoulder, and the air around the booth seemed to change all at once. "Do not turn around," he said quietly. "Someone is approaching us, and by the look on his face, he believes he has come to finish what the drink began." Chloe kept her hands locked in her lap as Adrien's warning settled over the booth like a drop in temperature. "Do not turn around. Someone is approaching us." Every nerve in her body strained against that instruction, but she obeyed because disobeying Adrien Romano no longer felt like a brave act. It felt like a mistake. She focused instead on the details directly in front of her, the candle trembling inside its glass holder, the untouched bourbon glowing amber under the light, the sharp white line of Adrien's cuff against the black sleeve of his jacket. He looked as composed as ever, one hand resting near his water glass, the other loose against the tablecloth, but Chloe could feel the precision in him now. He was not relaxed. He was waiting. The footsteps behind her were measured and unhurried, the kind that belonged to someone trying to appear welcome in a room where he did not need permission. Then a voice came, smooth and polished, carrying just enough warmth to sound practiced. "Adrien, I thought that was you." Adrien's expression did not change, but something colder passed through his eyes. "Victor." Chloe knew the name before she understood why. Adrien had not introduced the man, yet the single word landed with a familiarity that made her chest tighten. This was not a stranger from the dining room. This was someone from Adrien's world. She could hear it in the lack of surprise, in the controlled distance inside his tone. "You are dining alone tonight?" the man asked. Adrien leaned back slightly, as if indulging a harmless interruption. "Not anymore, apparently." The man gave a brief laugh. Still impossible to read. Chloe felt him move closer to the table. "And who is this?" Adrien answered before she could even think of speaking. "Someone under my protection." The silence that followed was brief, but it struck Chloe harder than anything else had that night. Under my protection. He had said it once in warning. Now he said it as fact. She kept her face neutral, though her pulse jumped painfully at her throat. The man behind her seemed to absorb the statement, then said lightly, "A waitress. Do you make a habit of underestimating women in service uniforms?" Adrien asked. The question was elegant. The meaning beneath it was not. "Only when I am given no reason not to," Victor replied. Adrien's gaze lifted past Chloe for the first time in several seconds. Then tonight must be educational. Chloe risked the smallest breath and let her eyes flick toward the polished silver knife beside the bread plate, catching only the faintest reflection of the man now standing near the booth. Mid-40s, tailored charcoal suit, dark blonde hair touched with gray at the temples. His posture was effortless, expensive, confident. He looked like a corporate attorney or a private equity partner, someone who knew exactly how to shake a hand, lower a voice, and destroy a life without leaving fingerprints. But his right hand was resting near the back of Adrien's booth, and on that hand was the ring. Silver serpent. Black stone. Chloe felt a jolt move through her so sharply she nearly flinched. Adrien saw it. Of course he saw it. His eyes dropped to her face for half a second, and that was enough to tell her two things at once. He understood exactly what had frightened her, and he needed her still. "Victor Hale," the man said, finally addressing her directly. "And you are?" Chloe opened her mouth, but Adrien answered again. "Not available for questions." Victor's chuckle was soft. "You have become possessive, Adrien." "No," Adrien said. "Only selective." Around them, dinner service continued with strained elegance. A waiter delivered sea bass to the table behind Victor and almost set the plate down crooked before correcting himself. The quartet had stopped altogether now, though no announcement had been made. Conversations had not ceased, but they had thinned, as if the room itself sensed a shift it could not name. Victor pulled out the empty chair at the end of the booth and sat without invitation. Chloe felt the impropriety of it instantly. This was not social. This was a claim. "I heard there was a problem with your drink," Victor said. Adrien's face remained unreadable. "Did you?" "News travels." "Interesting," Adrien replied, "considering it happened less than 3 minutes ago." Victor smiled then, and the expression was handsome in the way cold buildings could be handsome. Clean lines. No mercy. "You know how attentive your staff can be." Adrien let that sit between them. He did not challenge it. He did not accept it. He only watched Victor with that terrible patience Chloe was beginning to understand was more dangerous than anger. "You came over here for a reason," Adrien said at last. "Say it." Victor folded his hands. The serpent ring flashed under candlelight. "Very well. I came to warn you." Chloe felt the lie before the words had even fully landed. Adrien seemed to feel it too. How generous. Victor's smile thinned. "There are movements against you, Adrien. Unstable ones. People who think your control has grown too wide, too clean, too expensive for the rest of us." Adrien tilted his head slightly. "And you volunteered to be my friend tonight?" "I volunteered to tell you that your enemies are closer than you think." Victor's gaze slid to Chloe, just for a second, and in that second she knew with terrible certainty that he already recognized her fear. Much closer. Adrien's hand finally moved, slow and deliberate, to the stemless water glass near his plate. He did not drink. He only turned it once against the linen. "You poisoned my bourbon, and now you want to discuss loyalty over mineral water?" Victor's expression did not crack, but the room around the booth seemed to lose all warmth. "Careful," he said quietly. "Accusations can create panic." Adrien's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with decision. "No, Victor," he said in a voice so calm it made Chloe's skin go cold. "What creates panic is when a man forgets I can tell the difference between a warning and a performance, and tonight you have given me far too much of the second." Victor Hale's smile did not vanish when Adrien accused him. That was what made Chloe's pulse turn cold. Honest men usually reacted to direct suspicion with outrage, confusion, or at least offense. Victor only leaned back in the chair he had taken without invitation and adjusted the cuff of his charcoal suit as though Adrien had commented on the weather. The silver serpent ring caught the candlelight again, a tiny gleam of polished menace against perfect manners. "You always did mistake confidence for guilt," Victor said softly. Adrien's gaze never left him. "And you always did mistake refinement for innocence." The words landed between them, with the quiet finality of a door shutting. Chloe sat absolutely still, aware now of every sound in belladonna with painful clarity. A fork touched china at a nearby table. The hostess murmured something into her headset near the front. Somewhere in the back, a stack of glassware clinked together and then went silent, as if even the kitchen had learned to hold its breath. Victor looked at Chloe next, and for the first time that evening, his expression lost its polished ease. It did not become openly threatening. Men like Victor did not need obvious threats. They preferred implication, the velvet version of cruelty. "It is unfortunate," he said, "when staff members involve themselves in matters beyond their station." Chloe felt her spine stiffen before she could stop it. Adrien saw the movement and answered for her again, his tone cool as winter glass. "Her station tonight is beside me." Victor's eyes flicked back to Adrien, and something older moved beneath the surface now. Not surprise, resentment, history. Chloe could feel it without understanding it. These were not simply two powerful men crossing paths in a restaurant. These were men who knew each other's instincts, who had measured each other across years, perhaps across betrayals that had never fully healed. Victor rested his forearms lightly on the table and lowered his voice. "You should be careful, Adrien. Protecting the wrong person can become expensive." Adrien's expression did not shift, but his hand moved slightly closer to the black phone resting face down beside his plate. "And targeting the wrong woman can become fatal to a man's ambitions." Chloe's breath hitched. Victor heard it. Adrien did too. The room seemed to narrow around the booth, luxury shrinking into tension, candlelight turning thin and sharp. Then Adrien's phone buzzed once against the linen. He flipped it over, glanced at the screen, and in that 1 second Chloe saw something in his eyes finally harden into certainty. Not fear, not even anger, recognition. He set the phone down again with deliberate care. "Luca has the camera feed from the service corridor," he said. "Your bartender entered at 8:14. He left at 8:15 wearing a busboy's jacket and your driver's cap." Victor's face remained composed, but the silence after Adrien's words stretched half a beat too long. That was all Adrien needed. "You came here tonight to see whether the poison worked," Adrien continued. "When it did not, you came to the table yourself. Not to save me, to read the room." Victor gave a short exhale through his nose that might have passed for amusement to anyone less alert than Chloe. "You are making a dramatic story out of a simple misunderstanding." Adrien leaned forward then, just slightly, and the change in him was immediate. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Power moved most clearly through the absence of strain. "No," he said. "A dramatic story would involve shouting. What this involves is evidence." Victor's eyes sharpened. "Evidence can disappear. Only when men are still in control of the room," Adrien replied. "You are not." As if summoned by that sentence alone, Luca appeared at the edge of the dining area with two other men in dark suits fanning quietly into position near the elevators and the service corridor. They were careful, discreet, almost invisible to the untrained eye, but not to Chloe. She saw a couple near the windows pause mid-conversation. She saw the hostess glance toward the front doors and then straighten as if receiving instructions through her earpiece. She saw the last illusion of a normal evening begin to peel away. Victor noticed it too. His posture did not change, yet his attention sharpened in every direction at once. He had expected Adrien to be unsettled, perhaps isolated, perhaps slower to respond. Instead, he had walked straight into a net that was already drawing closed. But men like Victor did not lose smoothly. Chloe knew that before the next moment proved it. He smiled again. Only now the warmth was completely gone. "You think you have won because your men are in place," he said. "You still do not understand what tonight was." Adrien's eyes narrowed by the slightest degree. "Then enlighten me." Victor's gaze shifted to Chloe, and this time the look was nakedly strategic. The drink was never the point. She was. For one heartbeat, Chloe forgot where she was. The candlelight, the music stands, the gleam of polished silver and marble. All of it seemed to fall away beneath the weight of those words. Adrien did not look at her. That was what frightened her most. He remained focused on Victor, but his entire body changed, every line of it tightening with a terrible new awareness. "Explain," Adrien said. Victor folded his hands, serpent ring gleaming. "You asked the wrong questions, Adrien." The waitress recognized a symbol buried in a world she should never have seen. That means someone close to an old secret is still alive. Which means the dead accountant may have left more than rumors behind. Chloe's mouth went dry. Ethan. He knew about Ethan. Not vaguely. Not by accident. He knew enough to call him an accountant, enough to link him to the serpent, enough to understand that Chloe's presence tonight was not random. Adrien's voice dropped lower, quieter, infinitely more dangerous. You touched her brother. Victor did not answer directly. Your problem has never been that your enemies hate you, Adrien. It is that they know your habits. They know what you protect once it enters your line of sight. He rose from the chair in one fluid motion, elegant as ever, but now every polished gesture looked hollow to Chloe, like luxury draped over rot. And now, he said, glancing once toward the dining room entrance, they know exactly where to find the girl. Adrien stood at the same instant, the booth moving back with a muted scrape. His hand closed around Chloe's wrist, firm and immediate, no hesitation left in it at all. Luca, he said without looking away from Victor, we leave now. But Victor's final smile was the worst thing Chloe had seen all night, because it carried not victory, but timing. Too late, he murmured, and from somewhere beyond the velvet curtains near the private hallway came the sharp, unmistakable sound of the building alarms finally beginning to ring. The first sound Chloe noticed was not panic. It was the strange, elegant chime of crystal trembling against crystal as the alarm began to pulse through belladonna, thin at first, almost polite, as though even danger in this place had been taught good manners. Then the room changed all at once. Conversations broke apart mid-sentence. Chairs scraped back. Heads turned toward the private hallway where the red emergency lights had started to flash in soft intervals against the cream-colored walls. The chandeliers still glowed overhead. The candlelight still burned on white linen, but the illusion of safety had cracked wide open. Adrien's grip on Chloe's wrist tightened, steady and controlled, the grip of a man who had already moved beyond surprise into action. Stay with me, he said. There was no rise in his voice, no urgency wasted on theatrics, and somehow that made people nearby move faster than shouting ever could. Luca was at Adrien's side within seconds, one hand near his jacket, his gaze scanning exits, staff corridors, mirrored columns, faces. West elevator is blocked, he said. Someone triggered the building response system from the service level. Adrien did not slow. He stepped out from the booth, guiding Chloe with him, his body angled just enough to keep her inside the shield of his movement. Victor Hale remained standing beside the table for one suspended second, immaculate in his charcoal suit, his expression unreadable beneath the red pulse of the emergency light. Then he smiled. It was not victory. It was something colder. Recognition. As if a design he had set in motion hours ago had finally begun to unfold exactly on schedule. You should go, Victor said mildly. Things are about to become very inconvenient. Adrien did not answer him. He was already moving. Chloe stumbled once as they crossed the dining room, her low black work shoes slipping slightly on the polished floor, but Adrien adjusted without looking, keeping her near with the effortless precision of someone who had spent years navigating danger in rooms designed to hide it. Around them, belladonna was unraveling in layers. A woman near the bar clutched her pearl clutch to her chest, as if it might protect her from uncertainty. A couple near the windows argued in urgent whispers about whether to leave through the main entrance or wait for staff instruction. Two servers stood frozen beside the dessert cart until the head maitre d', pale and sweating beneath his perfect posture, motioned them sharply toward the kitchen. The quartet had abandoned their instruments. One violin still lay on its chair, catching red light like a warning left behind. Chloe tried to breathe evenly, but the old fear inside her had become something larger now, something with shape and memory. Ethan had sounded like this near the end. Not panicked. Focused. Too focused. As if the danger was no longer a possibility, but a set of steps already unfolding. Adrien led her past the hostess stand and toward a narrow corridor hidden behind a velvet partition near the private wine display. From the dining room, it looked decorative, another flourish in a restaurant full of money and polish. Up close, Chloe saw the brushed steel keypad tucked into the shadow beside the wall panel. Adrien pressed 4 numbers without hesitation. The door released with a soft click. Inside, he said. Chloe hesitated just long enough to glance back. Victor was still near the booth, but now he was speaking quietly to someone on his phone, his posture unhurried, almost elegant, as if he were merely adjusting a reservation instead of standing inside the collapse of an evening he seemed to have predicted. Luca caught her look and stepped between her and the dining room. "Move," he said, not unkindly, but with no room for argument. Chloe entered the hidden corridor. Adrien came in behind her, and Luca followed, sealing the door with a firm push that shut out most of the noise from the restaurant. The sudden dimness made Chloe blink. The passage was narrow and lined with dark oak shelves holding reserve bottles of Merlot and Bordeaux under low recessed lights. It smelled faintly of cork, cedar, and old stone, the kind of cool, expensive quiet built for collectors and secrets. The alarm sounded muffled in here, distant but steady. Adrien did not release her wrist until they reached the end of the corridor and descended a short flight of concrete steps into a locked tasting room below. The space was windowless, intimate, almost beautiful in a severe way. One long walnut table, 8 leather chairs, a decanter on a sideboard. No decoration except a framed black and white photograph of the building under construction decades earlier. It looked less like a safe room and more like the kind of place men used to discuss expensive decisions they never wanted repeated. Adrien finally let go of her wrist, but only to turn and face the door while Luca engaged 2 heavy locks Chloe had not noticed at first glance. "How long can this room stay sealed?" Adrien asked. "Long enough," Luca said. "Signal is restricted, but not fully blocked. I have 2 men on the lower garage entrance and 1 on the kitchen stairwell. The main lobby is compromised." Adrien nodded once. "And Victor?" Luca's jaw tightened. He did not try to leave. For the first time since the alarm began, Adrien's expression shifted. Not much. Just enough for Chloe to see the shape of his thinking sharpen into something grim. "Of course he did not," he said. "He wants us contained." Chloe wrapped her arms around herself, the shaking in her hands impossible to hide now. "Contained for what?" Adrien turned to her. The room was cool, but the weight of his attention carried heat all its own. "For leverage," he said. "For whatever your brother left behind." Ethan. The name did not need to be spoken. It was there between them anyway, alive in the silence. Chloe looked from Adrien to Luca and back again. "I do not understand." Ethan worked in accounting. He was not part of this world. Adrien's gaze held hers with unsettling steadiness. "That world," he said quietly, "has a habit of touching people before they realize it has entered the room." Luca's phone buzzed in his hand. He checked the screen and his face changed. "Sir." Adrien took the phone. Chloe watched his eyes move across the message, saw the cold stillness settle over him like a final piece falling into place. "What is it?" she asked, her voice smaller than she wanted it to sound. Adrien lowered the phone slowly. "The apartment where your brother lived," he said, "was searched tonight less than 20 minutes after you slipped me that note." Chloe felt the floor tilt beneath her. "That is not possible." Adrien's expression did not soften, but something in it grew more personal, more dangerous. "It is possible," he said, "if someone has been watching you for a very long time." For a moment, Chloe could not hear the alarm anymore. She only heard the rush of blood in her ears and the echo of Adrien's words repeating with merciless clarity. Someone had searched Ethan's apartment less than 20 minutes after she slipped the note. Not yesterday, not last week, tonight, which meant the danger had not awakened when she warned Adrien Romano. It had already been awake, watching, waiting for her to make one visible move. Chloe took a small step back until the edge of the walnut table pressed against her thighs. The tasting room suddenly felt too narrow, too quiet, too carefully built for conversations that changed lives. "I never told anyone about the apartment," she said, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew how fragile they sounded. "I do not talk about Ethan. I do not bring people there. I barely go myself." Adrien stood across from her, one hand resting lightly against the back of a leather chair, his posture perfectly controlled even now. But his eyes had changed. They were no longer the eyes of a man simply solving a problem in real time. They were the eyes of a man connecting an old map to a new fire. "You do not have to tell people your secrets," he said quietly. "Some secrets announce themselves the moment you protect them." Luca remained near the locked door, phone in hand, listening to instructions through a secure line. The low murmur of his voice came and went like static beneath the heavier silence in the room. Chloe looked at Adrien. at the expensive lines of his black suit now slightly disturbed for the first time all evening, at the calm that somehow made every word feel more serious. Then they were watching me because of Ethan. Yes. Adrien did not soften it. And tonight they confirmed you still matter. Chloe wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from the sudden unbearable sense that the last 6 months had not been grief at all. They had been surveillance. Her mind flashed backward through ordinary moments that no longer felt ordinary. The black SUV idling too long across the street from her building in Queens. The delivery man who had once asked, too casually, if she lived alone. The strange click on her phone line 3 weeks ago that she had blamed on bad service. She had dismissed each one because fear with